What is up, guys? Stix here. Today marks the 1-year anniversary of my top 10 most played MMORPGs in 2016 video. It was only around 6 minutes long, but went on to gain well over 750,000 views, thousands of comments and likes, and it became the 4th most popular video overall on our entire channel. Now, I recently asked the community what top 10 video they wanted next, and over 2,200 different users voted. 66% requested a top 10 most populated MMORPGs in 2018 video, meaning the 10 most populated MMORPGs going into 2018 for people that actually want to invest time into. Because, let's be frank here, nobody wants to invest time into a dead MMORPG, right? Now, let me preface this video by saying two different things. Number one, these games are not listed in any specific order, but they are the top 10 MMORPGs with the most active populations nevertheless. Number two, most MMORPGs and their developers no longer really report accurate population numbers. Therefore, these are ascertained through various different means. Now, let's take a quick look at which games are currently still active. When The Elder Scrolls Online launched, people thought it'd be the next greatest MMORPG. People figured it'd be like an online Skyrim game and were met with a swift punch to the gonads when they realized it wasn't. That, combined with bugs, had ESO met with an almost untimely end. People didn't give up on it though, and the team behind ESO worked hard to bring the game back from the edge of the cliff. The Elder Scrolls Online went on to grow larger and larger, recently releasing their Morrowind expansion, which proved to be a huge success. Going by Steam, almost 200,000 players played ESO in the last 2 weeks alone. According to ZeniMax, the team behind ESO, the console population is a little bit larger than the PC player base, meaning we're looking at least another 200,000 or more players on console. Then we have users that play the game through the standalone launcher. This would likely bring the population numbers up for the game over a 1-month period to a significant amount over 500,000. Guild Wars 2 launched to critical success, people finding its storytelling and combat to be both compelling and entertaining to experience. However, its population declined due to people realizing it was actually quite different to the original Guild Wars game and other games coming out at the same time. This forced ArenaNet to opt for a free-to-play model to continue growing, and since going free-to-play, the game's numbers have soared. Now, there are still a fair amount of people that dislike Guild Wars 2 because it's different to the original, but the game is great fun to play and is actually a much more modern take on the MMORPG genre. Now, with the recent Path of Fire expansion coming out for Guild Wars 2, you'd expect quite a large amount of sales, akin to ESO and Final Fantasy XIV's. However, that wasn't really the case. ArenaNet never gave numbers on the actual number of units sold for Path of Fire, and people didn't really notice too large a boost to the overall player base as opposed to when Heart of Thorns launched. But Guild Wars 2 is free to play until expansion content, so I mean, you can expect new players to pop in and out regularly to try the game out. Numbers are unknown, unfortunately, but there are at least over 100,000 players based off of estimated sales and previous estimated numbers before Path of Fire's release. Black Desert Online was so hyped that naturally it launched to ridiculous numbers. Over time, those numbers did dwindle, and the complaints that the game had become pay-to-win didn't really do it any favors. However, with the constant addition of new classes combined with the unrivaled action combat and breathtaking graphics, the game just kept growing. Recently, BDO also launched on Steam, which assisted in boosting its sales and player base further. General numbers for Black Desert are known. As of December 2017, the game has sold almost 5 million copies. 830,000 of those were through Steam, and on Steam there were well over 100,000 active players in the last 2 weeks alone. If you do the math and apply a similar purchase to active ratio to the non-Steam players, you likely end up with over 500,000 players over the last month. Similar to, but likely still less than ESO. EVE Online is one of the only sci-fi MMORPGs out there outside of Star Wars: The Old Republic and Star Trek Online. It is also by far one of the most popular sci-fi MMORPG on the market, having launched and remained as a pay-to-play MMORPG for many years. However, with better games out there, EVE saw an ever-increasing decline in population, prompting them to go the same route as Guild Wars 2 and make the game free-to-play. This upset a lot of players, but also gave new opportunities to players who couldn't play due to the paid model. After going free to play, EVE saw a substantial boost in population numbers. Over the last 2 weeks alone, there have been over 80,000 players playing EVE just through Steam. However, outside numbers are not revealed. Numbers before going free to play were not over 100,000, so with the addition of active Steam players over the last month, we're likely looking at around 150,000 or more active players over a month-long period, maybe a bit less. Blade & Soul, like Black Desert Online, came at a time when Eastern MMORPGs were not as hated as they are presently. As such, it launched to quite a good reception. Granted, not as good as BDOs, but still, for a free-to-play MMORPG, it launched fairly well. At the beginning of 2017, Blade & Soul was played by 45,000 players. Prior to the release of its latest expansion, Dawn of the Lost Continent, Blade & Soul was sitting at around 40,000 or so active players. Since the expansion, however, with all the people they reached out to, you can likely expect that to see a large bump, even if only temporarily, to well over 50,000 active players or more. I do feel like, though, if Blade & Soul actually wants to continue growing, they should probably take a note out of what Black Desert and Tera did and launch onto Steam. Secret World Legends launched years ago as a pay-to-play MMORPG and has remained as such up until recently, where they buckled under the pressure of a dying game and relaunched as a free-to-play MMORPG. Like Guild Wars 2, it is one of the most story-centric MMORPG available and a very fun game overall. However, it is definitely on the lower side of the popularity spectrum, boasting only around 15,000 active players on Steam over the last 2 weeks, totaling around 20,000 over the month. But the Steam numbers are decidedly lower than the player base that actually plays through the official launcher, as most of the players played the game without Steam all this time. So while the game may not have a huge population, you can be sure that there are at least around 40 to 50,000 active players over the course of the month. Maybe that's a little generous, I don't know. We don't really have specific numbers for the game anymore. Although RuneScape launched many moons ago, the game has gone through multiple iterations and remains one of the most popular completely free-to-play MMORPG on the market. Admittedly, there are two varying versions of RuneScape that are currently both running simultaneously, both old-school RuneScape and the updated version. The combined totals equate to well over 100,000 active players, which is fairly insane for a free-to-play MMORPG, and even crazier given when RuneScape was originally released, which was like at least 30, maybe even 50 years ago. Although the population has dipped somewhat over the course of 2017, with updates slated for 2018, RuneScape players should expect to see a familiar spike back up in the future. I know, there are going to be a ton of you guys that complain that Tera is dead, but Tera launched all the way back in 2012 and was met with quite a bit of praise. Well, initially, anyway. The game retained people's attention with its graphical style and combat until people found out that there wasn't really a whole lot to do in the game after actually hitting endgame. So, the game began to decline, forcing en masse the team behind Tera to adopt a free-to-play model to attempt to survive, and it did. Tera, as of 2017, has had over 65,000 players played over the last 2 weeks alone, only through Steam, not counting people who still play and launch it through the official launcher, which I do admit I still do myself. So, with the recent release of the Ellen Gunner and the upcoming release of new classes and content on the horizon, Tera has managed to boost the player base all the way back to well over 100,000 over just the last month's period alone. Final Fantasy XIV is probably one of the biggest success stories of all time when it comes to MMORPGs, and also simultaneously one of the largest failures. Not only did it actually physically die upon release, being touted as the worst MMORPG to have ever actually been released, its player base dwindled down to a single-digit thousands, which is insane considering its popularity today. Now, official active numbers are not 100% known, but going by Steam players, which total almost 70,000 active in the last 2 weeks, the Final Fantasy XIV census, which puts active players at around 700,000, and the Lodestone research putting players at around 300,000 to 400,000, we are definitely capable of guesstimating that over at least a single month period, there have been well over 500,000 active players playing Final Fantasy XIV. This is likely, however, due to the recent Stormblood expansion, much like ESO and Guild Wars 2. I know you all knew this was going to be here. I mean, why wouldn't it? Even now, it is the most populated MMORPG on the market. And no, Final Fantasy XIV and the Elder Scrolls Online do not have more players than WoW, not even close. When they report their numbers, they report total accounts, not total active accounts. I don't know how many times I've had to defend this point. It seems like every day people seem to think that WoW is less popular than Final Fantasy XIV and ESO. And I'm telling you, I love both of those games. I have an active subscription to Final Fantasy XIV and WoW. And I can tell you, Final Fantasy XIV does not have more players. Yeesh. Now, we know that in Warlords of Draenor, the population dropped from 10 million subscribers all the way down to 5.6 million. That was claimed to be World of Warcraft's lowest population point of all time after release. With the release of Legion, WoW had its subscriber base boosted to numbers that hadn't been seen since Wrath of the Lich King. Well over 10.1 million active subscribers as reported by Blizzard themselves. Now, some people have claimed that there were over 12 million at one point based off of the amount of units sold for Legion, but we cannot know for certain. However, what we do know is that Legion is still more actively played than Warlords of Draenor was and has been much better received. Since it had a larger player pool and is still more actively played, we can assume that at the very least it is more populated than Warlords of Draenor at its worst. Whether that is 6 million, 7 million, or more remains to be seen, but the fact that there is very likely still over 6 million active players in World of Warcraft makes it by far the most actively played MMORPG to this day. This does not count total active accounts, because WoW would probably have significantly more than Final Fantasy XIV has. Now, finally, with the release information of Battle for Azeroth and Classic servers, World of Warcraft could soon see numbers higher than ever before in its entire lifespan. So, with all of this out of the way, I do want to say that just because an MMORPG is more active than another does not make it better. You may or may not like the game and don't necessarily have to play the game just because other people do. However, playing a dead game sucks, which is why this video is being posted. So, go out there, find the MMORPG you want to play out of a selection of games you can still find things to do with people in, and go have some fun. Anyway, that is it for me, guys. Thank you for watching, and I will see you all in the next vid. Later.